Hey APUSH students, let's cover everything you need for period 9. Before we start, print out the free speed review sheet. You can find the link in the description below. Right now, look at period 9. Circle any people, events, or vocab, things that you don't quite remember that you know you want to focus on as we review. Then as you're confident that you've mastered these topics, you can check them off and move on to the next one. All right, here we go. Period 9 is one of the shortest units in APUSH, so you'll likely only see a few questions on your AP exam. You'll never see period 9 in a DBQ, but you're highly likely to see it in the multiple choice section. Ronald Reagan won the election of 1980 against Democrat incumbent Jimmy Carter. During his campaign, he promised to implement conservative policies and reduce government intervention in the economy. The support of groups like the Moral Majority also helped him win the election. His economic policy was known as Reaganomics and emphasized supply-side economics, tax cuts, and deregulation. The impact of Reaganomics continues to be debated. While some argue that it improved economic growth, others criticize Reaganomics for widening the wealth gap and increasing the national debt. The Reagan administration was also criticized for their role in the Iran-Contra affair. This event involved the illegal sale of arms to Iran, with the profits being used to fund anti-communist rebels in Nicaragua. Ultimately, Americans questioned how much Reagan actually knew about these illegal acts, which caused his approval ratings to drop. Reagan's administration also focused on national defense. Reagan's policies also helped bring an end to the Cold War. He eased tensions by opening lines of communication with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. He also challenged Gorbachev to tear down that wall, calling on him to bring greater freedom and openness to Eastern Europe.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Ultimately, the Berlin Wall fell on November 9, 1989. George H.W. Bush, Reagan's vice president, won the presidential election of 1988. This was due to Reagan's popularity and his campaign promise,
"Read my lips. No new taxes."
Bush's presidency included the Persian Gulf War, also known as Desert Storm. The goal of this military operation was to liberate Kuwait from Iraq's invasion and to protect oil reserves in the region. With the U.S. leading a coalition of international forces and achieving its objective with relatively low casualties, the Persian Gulf War was considered a military success. Bush's presidency also saw the end of the Cold War with the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. Despite his foreign policy successes, Bush lost his re-election to Democrat Bill Clinton. His loss was attributed to an economic recession which forced him to break his promise on no new taxes and the addition of third-party candidate Ross Perot. Ultimately, Bill Clinton won the election of 1992, running as a more moderate New Democrat. One of Clinton's campaign promises was lifting the long-standing ban of gay and lesbian individuals enlisting in the American Armed Forces. Although his Don't Ask, Don't Tell bill technically fulfilled this promise, it was controversial. While it prohibited discrimination against servicemen and women based on their sexual orientation, it also banned individuals who were openly gay and lesbian from serving in the military. One major policy achievement of the Clinton administration was the NAFTA agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. This aimed to reduce trade barriers and promote economic cooperation in North America. A domestic success of the Clinton administration was the budget reform, where he was able to reduce the federal deficit by increasing taxes on high-income individuals while also cutting spending. However, most of Clinton's achievements were overshadowed by his impeachment proceedings. The House brought charges of perjury and obstruction of justice in regards to Clinton's testimony about his affair with intern Monica Lewinsky, but he was acquitted in the Senate. Republican George W. Bush, son of George H.W. Bush, won the presidential election of 2000. This was one of the most contested presidential elections in American history, which ultimately had to be decided in the Supreme Court with the case Bush v. Gore. Bush faced a series of challenges during his presidency, including the federal response to Hurricane Katrina and a severe economic recession. The 2008 economic crisis was caused by a lack of oversight in the financial industry, including poor lending practices, which led to a housing crisis. This is also known as the Great Recession. One of his most important pieces of legislation was the No Child Left Behind Act. This set standards for academic achievement and held schools more accountable for student performance. But some criticized this policy, especially for its emphasis on standardized testing. But ultimately, the Bush presidency was dominated by a rise in terrorism. The war on terror started after the September 11, 2001 attacks by al-Qaeda on the World Trade Center, which killed 2,977 Americans. This marked a significant shift in U.S. foreign policy and national security measures. In the aftermath of 9/11, the U.S. government passed the USA Patriot Act, which expanded surveillance and law enforcement powers to combat terrorism. President Bush also created the Department of Homeland Security to better protect America from future attacks. And following 9/11, President Bush promised to bring down what he referred to as
axis of evil.
American forces fought against terrorism in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Operation Iraqi Freedom focused on removing weapons of mass destruction from Iraq and bringing down Saddam Hussein. Operation Enduring Freedom focused on ending the Taliban and al-Qaeda, as well as finding Osama bin Laden. And history was made in 2008 when Barack Obama became the first African-American president of the U.S. During his campaign, Obama promised healthcare reform. This was achieved with the Affordable Care Act, often referred to as Obamacare, which aimed to expand healthcare access to millions of Americans. However, conservatives opposed the law, arguing that it represented government overreach and debated the constitutionality of individual mandates. One of the major challenges Obama faced as president was the ongoing economic crisis as a result of the Great Recession. He implemented a series of measures, including the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which sought to stabilize the economy, create jobs, and prevent similar economic collapses in the future. Obama's presidency also oversaw the successful operation that led to the killing of Osama bin Laden, the leader behind the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Obama also fulfilled his campaign promise to bring the troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan, which ended the longest wars in American history. America also experienced significant economic changes during Period 9. Globalization reshaped the world's economy with interdependence between nations. This opened up new markets for American businesses, but it also increased competition with overseas manufacturers. Because of this, America experienced a decline in manufacturing, especially in industrial states, which became known as the Rust Belt. This led many Americans to leave the industrial Rust Belt cities and move to the suburban Sun Belt region. With the influx of prior city dwellers into more rural regions, the influence Southern states had on national politics increased significantly. In Period 9, we also see how technology reshaped America's society and economy. The rise in personal computers impacted a variety of fields, from business to finance and education to entertainment. This also led to the creation of the internet, which led to the dot-com boom. Online capabilities contributed to the globalization process economically, but also impacted society and culture with the rise of cell phones and social media platforms. These new platforms connected people, ideas, and businesses across the globe. This period saw a significant shift in immigration, which also inspired new immigration policies. After 1980, the largest portion of American immigrants were coming from Latin America and Asia. Census data from 2010 revealed that Asians were the fastest growing immigrant group in America. The number of Asian immigrants has doubled from 1970 to now, and that's attributed to the Immigration Act of 1965, which lifted strict quotas on Asian immigrants. Significant immigration policies were passed by several administrations. Reagan approved the Immigration Reform and Control Act, and Obama signed the DACA Act. So what does this look like on exam day? For causation, you could be asked about effects of Reagan's economic policies, specifically Reaganomics. College Board might also ask you about the causes and effects of globalization. Comparison questions might ask about recent political polarization, specifically for you to compare conservative and liberal ideologies. And for continuity and change, you're likely to see questions about changes in foreign policy after the Cold War. So be ready for multiple choice asking about America's involvement with the Middle East, from Harry Truman to George W. Bush. Check out the APUSH Ultimate Review Packet for more help. We've got timeline, study guides, and essay practice. Follow the link in the description below to get a free preview. And if you think this video was helpful, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.